So, I was working on some projects to announce my return when I saw this beautiful video drop into my YouTube recommendations, and then my Twitter feed. All over my Twitter feed. And while I have heard about this project for a while now, it wasn't something I was really keeping my eyes on. It seemed decent for the teasers that were constantly posted on VivziePop's channel, but it didn't really interest me too much in terms of the concept. And after watching the pilot, I feel like I was right. I'm not gonna go scene by scene in this review because the pilot is on YouTube and you should watch it, but I am gonna do my best to quickly run through points and give brief explanations as to my reasoning. Now, to start things off, I want to say that there was a lot of heart and effort put into this pilot. From the voice actors, to the artists, to the animators, it was really easy to see they all enjoyed working on this project, and it's not something that they just worked on half-heartedly. And I have got to say, the voice actors are really what carried this movie. Everyone had so much variety and energy put into the pilot that it really helped in diversifying the characters and molding their personalities. And speaking of characters, a lot of the designs were actually pretty great. Charlie, Serpentius, Cherry Bomb, Alistair, just all of them had great varied designs that really helped the show stand out and complement their personalities. But what good is talking about the strong points about the show without actually talking about the weak points as well? And my two biggest issues I have with the pilot are its writing and its humor.
In the criminal justice system, the people are represented by two separate yet equally important groups: the police who investigate crime and the district attorneys who prosecute the offenders. These are their stories.
A lot of the characters and jokes are extremely on the nose, and the plot is very easy to predict. Angel Dust is a prostitute, and all of his jokes are simply that he is a prostitute. Serpentius is your quirky kingpin overlord that ends up being the butt of jokes that end up having him be portrayed as the typical loser supervillain. Alistair is your average, bored, all-powerful entity with a high chance of ulterior motives to come later on in the show. And Vaggie is your typical hot-headed best friend, or girlfriend in this case. The news anchors were news anchors, and the egg boils were the typical underlings. They're all characters that I feel like I've seen before in other shows, and while it's a good baseline to create characters, it's not something that should be praised when it comes to the originality of those tropes. Some of the lines felt very unneeded, and the sexual jokes got old really quick. The scene foreshadowing Alistair, where Charlie announces her redemption hotel plans on TV, was really messy and ended up having things flash by way too fast. Almost too much so when Alistair was introduced amongst the background characters. The Happy Hotel song, while one of the highlights of the pilot, had its own share of very on-the-nose depiction of lyrics, poor sound mixing, and the scenes flashing by way too fast. And when I mean poor sound mixing, I mean that come the last third of the song, it became really hard to understand what was being said because the instrumentals were way too loud and overbearing. The choreography was great otherwise. Outside of the many literal scenes depicting the descriptions of the people in the scenes, the way everything flowed felt very well put together, and Charlie's final fiery scene really hit home hard. Speaking of Alistair, he's also one of the more uninteresting characters of the pilot. He feels like every other cookie-cutter super powerful evil guy who has ulterior motives to help Charlie with her hotel. Because throughout the whole pilot, they hammered in the fact that Charlie is the Princess of Hell, and how Alistair conquered many territories, murdered many people, and took over many of the all-powerful overlords of Hell. Honestly, his gestures and the small ticks he gives when talking and looking at Charlie really give out that big hint that he could possibly be the end-all be-all conflict near the end of the series if this thing goes on. I mean, they really hammer it all in on you near the end for it not to be the case. And if it really isn't, then good on Vivzie, I guess. The two other smaller issues I had were the overuse of sound effects and the backgrounds. This is Hell, so I expect red and black. But there is a lot of red and black use for both characters and the backgrounds. The way things are colored, it sometimes makes it hard to tell what's going on with the more important characters. They blend in too much time to time, and while honestly it makes the scenes look amazing, it hurts character performance. The biggest examples of this would be, again, the TV broadcast scene. The background characters had too much detail on them, and it really made it hard to look at Charlie when she was in the crowd. The only other time I can really think of the backgrounds that were made right was the battle scene between Cherry Bomb, Angel Dust, and Serpentious. The background didn't have too much detail or complementary colors put into it that made the characters bleed into the scene, which made action much more enjoyable to watch. When it came to the sound effects, it was really hit or miss. Either they overlapped each way too much, or the energy of the effects didn't match the energy of the movements for the characters they were making. It wasn't as bad as listening to something like the Johnny Test Whip sound effect over and over, but it certainly could have slowed down the use between the effects. Having to listen to dialogue, instrumentals, and 4 sound effects at once made the audio way too overbearing on some scenes. The biggest example being, again, the TV broadcast segment. As you can tell, that segment of the pilot was really bad. Overall, the pilot itself wasn't that bad, but it certainly wasn't anything that makes it worth anything more than a mediocre rating in my opinion. The voice actors and character designs were great, but everything else just kind of pulls it down. The pacing was off, the backgrounds and background characters made it hard to keep focus on the main characters, and the sound mixing made it hard to hear characters speaking or singing from time to time. The jokes were not that varied and got old quickly, while the characters felt very one-note and tropish. I understand that there was a lot of time and effort put into this pilot, almost 3 years worth of effort. But I think most of that time was spent into the art and visuals, when it should have gone into polishing the writing and the characters. Also, I feel like if this show is looking to get picked up by a streaming service or television company, it's going to have a lot of its language and jokes neutered to a point where it's almost unrecognizable. Because even with adult animations, stuff gets changed and taken out to meet the company's broadcast standards. The pilot wasn't the most amazing thing ever, but it wasn't terrible. It was just kinda meh. I do hope if VivziePop decides to continue with the series, that she looks into putting a bit more effort into the writing and dialogue to make the plot more engaging and the characters and jokes more entertaining to watch. Because honestly, if you strip these characters of their amazing voice actors and replace them with mediocre ones, the show would be much, much more boring.